Thank you for tuning in today. This conversation is organized as part of Festival for Good 2020, Asia's largest celebration of social enterprises and the social impact they create. This year, 130 social enterprises will be showcased throughout the month-long festival across 5 different features. Festival for Good 2020 is brought to you by Race Singapore in partnership with DBS Foundation and our virtual venue partner, South Beach Consortium. For those of you watching from our website, do hop over to Zoom for a more interactive experience with the panelists. There will be a Q&A segment later. For those on Zoom, explore the Q&A function at the lower bar, where you will be able to raise your questions to the panelists. If you face technical difficulties or require any help, please use the chat function to message the host, and someone will support you. Thank you, and we will be starting the webinar shortly. Okay, over to Casper, who will be moderating our discussion today.
And I just want to wish everybody a very good afternoon for joining us. If you are joining us on Zoom or via our Festival for Good website, welcome to you. Welcome to this Virtual Festival for Good conversation. It's on making diversity count, finding ways for inclusion in the community. As you might know or you might not know, social enterprises in Singapore are primarily meant or set up to serve the vulnerable groups in Singapore. And the main way by which they do so is through employment. That is one singular way by which they actually embark on inclusion and making diversity within the community. But here, this afternoon, what we hope to find out a bit more is that beyond employment, what else goes into inclusion? That's really through the social enterprises themselves, or also from a corporate viewpoint. So today with me, I've got a few esteemed guests. I've got Leon from Eden and Ellie. I've got Bernard from Iron Nori. I've got Eliza from Will and Well. And also on screen with us, dialing in from Tokyo, Japan, is Mike from Sumitomo Life Insurance. Welcome, everybody, and very happy to have all of you here this afternoon with me. So as I start, maybe what I'll do is that I'll just go around Robin a little bit and just invite each of my guests to start off by, just defining from a very personal viewpoint what inclusion means to them, and also what got them started on this journey to bring about inclusion through whatever activities or endeavors that they have embarked on. So why not I start with Leon?
Thank you so much, Casper, and a big thank you and congratulations to Raise for running the Festival for Good this year. Again, despite, I think, a lot of the challenges and hurdles as well, I think it really speaks volume to the amount of commitment we all have collectively to social enterprises, despite the challenges that we all as Singaporeans are going through. So, and I think it's been especially challenging for us as well at Eden and Ellie, trying to make sure that we are managing our beneficiaries and clients as well as we can. So, hi, I'm Leon To. I'm the co-founder of Eden and Ellie. We are a jewelry brand based here in Singapore, producing jewelry for women and men with the support of adults with autism here in Singapore. For us, I think inclusion has always been there since day one, about how do we bring communities in need to really support them and bring them into our supply chain to make sure that that's really the end-to-end purpose, supporting them, not only giving them employment, but also tracking them from their outcomes of how they are improving because of the work they're engaged in. And I think that's been one of the most beautiful, and proud things we have been watching our artisans, come in to start learning and really start producing some of the best and most beautiful, intricate jewelry that you can find out there. My journey into this started when I met Stephanie, the founder of Eden Ellie, and she showed me some of the jewelry and the pieces. And when she showed it to me, it was these Peranakan bangles, blue bangles, and it had these 1 to 2 millimeter size beads, which are all woven by needle and thread and set on 24K gold-plated metal. And that was really quite something to just look at it from afar and see how beautiful it was, but also bring it so close and see how intricate it was and so much care that needed to go into it. And after that, I was hooked. and I said, okay, how do I support this? How do I get involved? And that began my journey as the co-founder of Eden and Ellie.
Great. I want to pick up on something that you mentioned, that beyond just employment, it's also about engagement, taking care of their well-being as they come into being part of what you do. How do you see that this engagement has actually changed them from where they were previously, and also what are some of the changes that you've seen over time?
I think it starts with the context and challenges that many of the adults with autism face. I think one of the starting points for them is that after they leave, a very structured special needs education system, they come out and they have sometimes an inability to find work. That's one, and two, actually they lose that structure all around them. And what happens from there is that there is some talk about how they do regress. So some of the negative behavior come back again. And what we actually track isn't just about whether we are employing them and just providing them work, but also we want to understand, are they coming to work? Are they happy? Do they like what they do? Are they actually coming to work on time? And I think a simple measure of it, for example, was when many of them first started. Many of them had to be accompanied to work by family or even the parents. And subsequently, because of the structure, it becomes much easier for them to feel more at ease about their daily routines. And some of them actually do end up going to work on their own, taking the MRT,
Nice.
taking the bus. And I think these are small things that we are looking out for to ensure that they're becoming more independent, they're also happy and engaged, and we're trying our best to not just think of it as employment, but really a holistic well-being and the support there.
Interesting. I'll come back to you on the point that you raised earlier, maybe about regression, but I think that's a question that I'll probably angle it for everybody as well. But maybe for now, we'll just move over to Bernard. Same question, what does inclusion mean to you? And really, what has motivated you to kind of embark on this journey?
Thank you. Thanks for getting me on to this panel. So I'm Bernard. I'm actually a consultant for a special needs restaurant group called Iron Nori. We run a restaurant over in Macpherson's and another bistro pub over in Tanjong Pagar. And really, inclusion is just about bringing everyone together. And interestingly, during this COVID seasons, of course, we survived that circuit breaker periods. Our group of crew around with us are not only just the intellectually challenged autism individuals, but inclusion became actually a big word across for us, because during circuit breaker, we had some rough sleepers. Rough sleepers meaning someone who's probably homeless. They didn't have a place to be staying in. And because of circuit breaker periods, they were probably not really allowed to be sleeping on the beaches or even in parks. And we actually adopted a few of them coming in to be working across with us. And I guess inclusion really is just at a different point in time when there are needy individuals, where there's a need for them to bring them into an environment where we try our very best to understand, to work across with them. They may not be working with us forever, just like the few rough sleepers who were with us. They were only working for 2 months. During that period of time, we found different projects for them. One of the very strange and interesting project was that period of time, just nice after circuit breaker, we had our mooncake festival. So one of the senior auntie, her job was very simple, just to sit down there to make and prepare mooncakes for the festival. So I thought, I guess to us, in being inclusive, inclusion, is just bring everyone together. We just find jobs for each other. It's a very simple, easy community. We just work across with everyone.
Yeah. And you would think that Singapore wouldn't have any homeless people sleeping on the streets.
There are.
Yeah, so interesting. Actually, this is the first I've heard, in fact, somebody trying to reach out to rough sleepers and trying to engage them, giving them a place to belong, being part of the community. I mean, that's what you were talking about as inclusion. So I do understand also in terms of the people that work within Nori, you have quite a broad range of beneficiaries, as we call them, or vulnerable groups. How do you manage this entire dynamic of different groups? This whole mishmash of a community.
Okay, so the place that we are operating on, we used to only work with intellectually disabled individuals. Yeah, after a few years or after a short while, we started to realize that if you only work with one group of beneficiary, those of them, there are some jobs that they can't do. And if we only employ, example, intellectually disabled, all of them can't do the same jobs. And that makes the whole company having a lack of an area. So I give a very simple example. Most intellectually challenged will have issues with arithmetic, with math duties, which means that almost all of them cannot be cashiers. Yeah, so it was just purely based on a requirement. We said, let's find someone else. So there are autism individuals who can be very good at math, but just that they focus very strongly on the math parts. They may not be as good on the emotional area. So we realized that different special needs individuals, they tend to complement each other. And then along the way, that's where we started talking to ex-offenders, ex-drug users. Then we started to realize these are the underserved community. They needed help, but they're actually cognitively able. They are very cognitively able. They can do every single thing. So we realized, why don't we put them in the kitchen, since they can do every single thing that can be done. But we just need to bring them up to speed. Once they're ready, we can probably put them off to another employment. So again, that might be just a simple illustration of inclusions. We use their different abilities, mash them across over together. And so we never thought about whether is this special needs restaurant going to just focus on ASD, going to be intellectually challenged.
Right.
We started to bring people, and that's where I think the rough sleeper came in just nice at this point in time.
But that's the true spirit of diversity and inclusion, where you actually look at a person for who they are and what they can bring to you, rather than for their ability or the disability. So that's a very interesting concept. I think let's hold on to that. Maybe we'll just also move to Eliza right now. Just to share with us, what's your view? And just to share, Eliza is amongst us, not only just the only female on this panel. That's diversity for you. But she's also a designer. So it will be interesting to hear her perspective. What does inclusion mean to her? And also, what got you on this journey?
So yeah, as a designer, so a lot of my process is about designing with the forethought of the minorities or the marginalized groups, right? And if you are or rather, my approach in design is that when I am able to design with somebody that has challenges with buttoning clothes, then putting on buttons for everyone would become easier. So we won't have to attempt to try and button your cuff with just one hand, So what we do is in our design, we swap it out with other functions. So we have mag snap, where you just gotta flick your wrist and then you got your cuff done, right? So that's I think it's in the details that reflects our thoughts and our design when we think about inclusion. Yeah.
I see. What does this whole big theme on inclusive design, and what inclusive, maybe you can share it rather than coming from me, what inclusive design is, and how does it apply to the mainstream? Just a sideline, actually, Eliza was supposed to dress all of us on the panel. But
Still waiting.
Okay, we're still waiting, we're looking forward to that. Yeah, but inclusive design.
Yeah, so I think it's in the design process, it's the principles that we apply. And that means it's to really understand what are these different dressing challenges that are out there, right? And in that, we do a lot of observations, we do a lot of interviews. We don't only speak with just the users themselves, we speak to their caregivers, stakeholders that are involved in that entire dressing up process. And I think that is what sort of makes it different for us, because we really attempt to put ourselves in the shoes of our clients to understand what their varied dressing challenges are, what their style preferences are, right? And that's how and that comes along with a lot of prototyping and testing to ensure that it is true that this solution is able to enable and empower this person in this task.
Yep.
But yeah.
So the things that we take for granted, like even just buttoning a button,
Yeah.
you know, for people who maybe have cerebral palsy, it's really so difficult for them. And these are the things that we really take for granted. And really, I think whatever that you have come up with in terms of a design can also be applied to the mainstream. So people like us, we can still benefit from that.
Yeah.
Just as we were talking about earlier, just before this panel, as we were trying to mic ourselves out with all the wires and things like that. Yeah, so thanks, Eliza. We'll come back to you again. Mike, we didn't forget you on screen. So happy that you're still here with us. We just to hear from you, what does inclusion mean from your viewpoint, you being the only corporate representative in our panel this afternoon? And really, what got you started on this journey?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Casper, for having me here today. I'm Mike Momoto from Sumitomo Life. Sumitomo Life, my employer, is one of the largest Japanese life insurers. And we have about 43,000 employees, and of which more than 700 are persons with disabilities, so-called PWDs. We have been hiring, retaining, and promoting PWDs for decades. In the course of that, I founded a corporate initiative called Tomwork, which aims to bring innovation, PWD employment space, together with passionate partners in Singapore. So today I'm happy to share about my experience, why we kicked off some such initiative, what is our approach, and how it came about. And my turning point goes back to a decade ago, when we had the first son with disability. I am a parent of a child who has a visual impairment from birth. He is 10 years old right now. And actually, he is struggling to wear a clothing every day. That's a case, actually. And I have learned a lot about disability, society, and education systems to help him cope with that society. But the reality is there are a lot of struggles ahead of him, from daily lives, education, as well as employment. So that's why I kick-started a corporate initiative called Tomwork. And my aspiration is creating a better society, hopeful future for him and PWDs. That's my source of my motivation.
Understand. Thank you, Mike. So in some cases, some of our motivations are really very personal. It's where home is, it's where family is. But I will also say that, you know, for Sumitomo to actually achieve 700 PWDs in your workforce, that's amazing. Since you straddle both Singapore and Japan, I think there's also a question actually from the Q&A, which I think perhaps it's quite relevant at this point in time to address. You know, comparatively, how do you think both societies compare in terms of being inclusive and also the economies? How do we compare as being inclusive? And also from your viewpoint, what more can be done?
Yeah, that's a good point. So actually, in Japan, we have a governmental quota which requires companies to hire PWDs to some extent. 2.2% of employees should be persons with disabilities. That's why there is a motivation for companies to hire PWDs. But our vision is beyond that. We want to create more meaningful opportunities, rewarding jobs. And where persons with disability can achieve their fullest potential and satisfy it. Actually, we have a subsidiary company called Sumisei Harmony, where 200 employees are there, and more than 80% of them are PWDs. And the retention rate is very high, more than 90%. So we'd like to improve the environment as well as their motivation to pursue their fullest potential. In Singapore, I know that there is no governmental quota. So the point is we need to focus on abilities, not disabilities. So as Bernard said and Leon said, person with autism has a good concentration and very good at repeatable tasks, and they are very good at in some tasks. So when we focus on abilities, they perform very well and add the value to our corporates. That's the point.
Right. So actually, what you're saying also, it goes beyond just policies. Policies can set what is that baseline, what's your benchmark, but it's really up to you to go beyond that. And 80% is remarkable for any company to have PWs make up 80% of your workforce. So Mike, just kind of staying on with you, I wouldn't imagine that it would be easy, despite all the regulations and whatnot. So how has the journey been so far? In terms of, I know Sumitomo being having that culture in itself, but spinning off different entities. And in Singapore, of course, you have Tomo Work. How has the journey been so far in trying to build an ecosystem through business that is inclusive for persons with disabilities?
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, our core business is insurance. So it may sound a bit strange, out of scope, that I'm working on PWD employment. But this is very relevant to our corporate vision, that is empowering your future, which should be regardless of disadvantage or disabilities. And on the top of that, PWD empowerment, PWD inclusion is one of the hottest topics in Japan and even globally. The point is, my passion is here. Corporate vision is here, and this is a systemic issue we need to address together with partners. So we take an innovation approach, ecosystem-oriented approach to make a collective impact on this issue. And at the beginning point, actually, I felt lonely because some of our colleagues are very supportive, but the rest looks kind of skeptical. But vision is there, and I made an impact, and I have a lot of conversations with them. And gradually, colleagues who support me is increasing. That's my experience.
I see. Nice. Very interesting. I like that part about being lonely, and they always say that it's lonely up front and it's also lonely up top. Maybe at this point, I would like to ask Bernard, because you having so many different clients that you serve. Also, what's the journey been like? It may not be particularly intuitive that these are the groups of people that you ought to have in your workforce. So how is it for you?
Actually, the whole journey for us working across with PWD has been wonderful.
Okay,
wonderful.
great.
Why was because we started off thinking that we are just an F&B business. And if you're aware, in F&B, the turnover of manpower is really high. Yeah, F&B is a really tough job. There are diners who will be screaming at you, asking for food to come out at lightning speeds, complaining about everything possible. But interestingly, to our surprise, or rather now that we totally understand, the PWDs, they are individuals who were just working very hard, following the routes that they are given. They do complain, they do scream a little bit at us, we do scream at them. But the actual tenacity, the resilience that you see in the PWD staff are so much higher. Yeah, and of course, we do have able-bodied crew who work across with us. But during the recruitment process, we ask them one key question. This is a special needs restaurant. Are you willing to work here? They must say yes. They don't say yes, we won't employ them. So whoever comes through the door as an employee, they are already accepting the fact that they are working with PWDs. So we have no issue internally. Yeah, and I must say that once we clear that mental hurdle amongst the operator, the owner, the shareholders, that journey is not tough at all. It is easy.
Right,
especially since employment in F&B is difficult. This issue, this part about PWD, that them being resilient, tenacious, actually comes in as a very strong value in the F&B line.
That's a very interesting thought. In fact, if you think about it, they are actually more resilient than us, who take a lot of things for granted, and we assume certain things must be certain ways, and we ourselves think that we are the only ones adjusting to working with them. In fact, they are also adjusting to working with us. So it's a two-way thing, and I think that this mutual respect and mutual allowance for to build up this level of trust and understanding is critical for anybody who wants to embark on inclusion. Leon, just back to you as well. In terms of resilience, is that something that you see in your staff who has ASD?
Yes, I think that there's no doubt about the context of how they are they're working, and sometimes the expectations we have on them as well, right? I think they do very much surprise, and also, I think down to what Mike and Bernard was talking about, it's about ensuring that we are providing the environment that brings the best out of them. And I think for individuals, our artisans who are on the autistic spectrum, I think many of them actually have great gifts that they bring to work every day. And I think what we've found is about trying to find a way to create the environment that allows them to bring it out in a safe, comfortable way. And so then when you go into our artisan space, you actually see that many of them are just looking down, they're working really hard, and they don't stop, right? Sometimes you walk in and it's like you don't exist, right? They just continue working. And I remember, when we went in once, there was also an individual who kept identifying that some parts were a little bit broken. And we're thinking, okay, sure, so let me see it. And you look at it, and just to put it in context, it's like a 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter size bead. They pick it up, they look at it, and they say, for the naked eye, you can't see anything. But for them, they're so committed to it. They're like, there's a small chip on it. We cannot use this. And I don't realize it until I look really carefully. And maybe because I'm also, a bit old already, cannot see, right? So, I have to
I
put
think
it
you might
down.
not be qualified to say.
So you do that. But this is it. We had a meal with them as well, and they, we asked them, why did you like, working at Eden and Ellie? And many of them stood up and they said, we like beating. Like simple, and then they sat down. We're like, oh, okay, that's great, right? But and of course, they have very different ways of communicating it. But when you sit down, and you watch them work. It's just incredible, how that aspect comes out of them.
So they're not only just resilient, but they are very good workers, provided you are able to find what really suits them and are able to harness all their different energies and abilities.
I think so, and I think it's a match, right? You need to, if they really are committed, and they have that personal buy-in, and they have that safety net, then the resilience comes very naturally. Yep. I think it then allows them to say, okay, I feel safe here. I want to be here. I want to continue. I want to keep going. There are times where our coaches have to tell them, okay, time's up. We have to go now, and they're still working. So I think it's about making sure that we have all the right structure, environments, and then the safety and comfort for them to bring out that resilience.
Right. Thanks, Leon. I'd like to move over to Eliza, being a designer. So this question, I think it's really very apt for you. In trying to make something inclusive, whether it's your business or embarking on a project that's inclusive, would you say that is by chance or by design? I know you don't only just design clothes, but you actually do manufacture them, so you have a workshop and you do employ as well. So what is it for you in terms of consideration, chance or design?
Design.
I would expect you to answer that, actually. You said chance, something's wrong.
Yeah, what chance is
Trick
this
question.
we're talking about? It's. I think for all of us to be doing what we do, it's a very intentional decision, right? There's so many needs out there, right? Why do we choose to focus on what we focus on? That makes us also special and individual. So a lot of the process in that design is what we shared, right? It's a lot of, and even with what you guys had shared earlier, it's about identifying what are these key benefits, right? Where's that place that they are able to strive best in? Likewise for us, what are the kind of functions that we can design in place such that they can also be empowered and enabled daily, right? And so they don't have to take half an hour to put on a shirt anymore. It's about finding that thing and designing and putting in place or just moving some parts around to just enable them, right? So I think that is across the principle across whether is it in the design of the products, the solutions, or whether is it in the service, right? The workshops that we hold as well. It's called So Simple. We basically teach that technical skill along with that design thinking bit, so that you're able to complement it together, and ultimately it's to be able to design, think, and also do together. I think that's what makes the conversation about inclusion all the more rich, right?
And I suppose design is really about who you're designing for. So the human-centeredness of the design, human-centered design. And I think this principle works across the entire endeavor, whatever that you're trying to do, whether you're doing for able-bodied persons. If you bring somebody in, you got to get them up to speed on the job. You got to get them assimilated into the work culture. And likewise, if you are bringing persons with disabilities, or you are bringing certain vulnerable groups inside, you have to understand kind of challenges that they have, the baggages that they have, and how do you actually help them to overcome even as you bring them into work. So thanks. Well, I'll just hold it for a while. I'll go back to Mike, who is on the screen. And Mike, same question. Tomo Works, I suppose it's quite a big endeavor, and it's something that's really new in Singapore. What kind of design principles, or do you have to really consider and put in place in order to make Tomo work? Sorry, pun intended. I think we can't hear you. Sorry, Mike. We have a bit of a technical issue here. We can't really hear you. So.
Sorry.
We can hear you now. Great, good stuff.
Sorry.
Okay.
So we focus on PWE, and actually the point is, what is kind of most difficult issues for PWDs, and we figure out that employment is one of the most struggling part for them. So they seek a job and have a lot of interviews, more than 50 times, but they can't get a suitable job for them. This is a systemic issue. So the point is we visualize their ability, because ordinary people see their disability. And in an interview, they focus on disability, not ability. So we kind of brought together corporates and PWDs, and we did some trials where PWDs perform well throughout some corporate projects. And they did it. And some of them are hired by a company. So the point is visibility is one point, and another would be empathy. They can do it, so they have less opportunity. So we realize that fact. We can provide suitable opportunity together with our partners.
Understand. And that's really also a design principle where you are able to create environment by which they can thrive and showcase that same environment to someone who has the interest, or is even trying to think about how do I bring these groups of people in. So I think that's really quite interesting. I think there's also a question in the chat currently. I think it's really quite aligned. So it's particularly for you, Mike. It goes like this. Yeah. In this fast-paced and performance-oriented society, how can employers better communicate or manage work performance or expectations to the beneficiaries? That's the first part. And the second part is, while including the beneficiaries in this common work environment with everybody else, how do you create a safe space for them to fail and succeed?
Yeah. So in our company's case, there are two models. One is PWDs are majority. As I mentioned before, Sensei Harmony is the place where PWDs are majority. More than 80% of them are PWDs. And in minority case, this is Sumitomo Group, Sumitomo Insurance Group. So in this kind of group, PWDs are minority. And I'd like to talk about minority model because this is very kind of universal. And in the minority case, the point is PWDs work with people without disabilities. They are majority. And they create processes and represent culture. The point is that we provide training for them to understand the type of disabilities and how we communicate with them and what is the special needs. So raising awareness, after we raise awareness, employees understand the special needs and build up a collaborative culture to achieve the same goal in the organization. So raising awareness, training, other would be joining the voluntary activities, as well as join the mentoring program. So these kind of activities are very important to build up an inclusive culture in your organization.
Right, right. So actually, in a sense, I think there's a certain goal here. The goal whereby you create a work culture where inclusivity and inclusion is the norm. Anybody who comes in,
Right.
you are getting yourself assimilated into that new norm, which is a better new norm than a COVID new norm, but I just couldn't resist.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's really a very big vision for a lot of us to work toward. So thank you, Mike, for that. I think on the same line, I would like to kind of think about in terms of innovation. Is there a certain element of innovation that you had to kind of adopt or put in place in order for you to create that work environment suitable for the beneficiaries that you serve? Anybody?
I thought I can answer to that.
Yep, go for it.
Actually, there was something that Mike mentioned just now, which I really resonated across with, is that our PWDs are really the receiving end of empathy, or can they also be on the giving end and actually be positively contributing outwards? Yeah. So actually, there was something that we tried last year, and we're actually redoing it every other month, is that we get our beneficiaries within the restaurant to be giving, to be going out to be skill-based volunteer. So it actually started last year in August, just about National Day periods. We actually brought them outwards to a nursing home to be cooking across for the senior citizens who are staying there. So we actually sponsored the lunch, got them there to cook, to prepare, to give. And that was when we realized that to us, that was innovative. That's why we brought beneficiaries outwards. They are there volunteering, giving outwards, contributing. And when they start giving, they start contributing, they start volunteering, they feel good.
Yes.
They feel very good. Yeah, and they actually came back wanting to take photos with the senior citizens, and that actually pushed up their whole morale together. Yeah, so that was that innovation part that I thought was something that we actually did, we tried. Yeah, and even recently, we actually got an intellectually disabled lady working across with us. As per all intellectual disability, they have some issues with math, with looking at numbers. But we got her to use some technology to help her. So that in the whole work process, there's always a need to key in invoices into the accounting system. And technically, an intellectually challenged individual will have issues doing that. But we got her to start to take photos. And using OCR, using optical character recognition software,
Wow.
using such technology, she can just take an iPad, take photo, and upload that picture onto the accounting system, and just cut and paste. So she doesn't need to know what are the numbers, but cut and paste, everything in. And that actually allow her, an intellectually challenged individual, to be an accountant clerk. So I must share that actually with such innovative thoughts, try. Just play around with different things. They can do a lot. And when they started to, when we all start to see that she's contributing, she feels good.
Great, great. I think there are a couple of sound bites, hashtags that's coming out from this afternoon's conversation. And that is so simple, like the workshop. So innovation need not be difficult, it need not be bombastic, it need not even be expensive, right? So Leon, what kind of innovations do you guys actually undertake?
Wow, it's a big word, and I think it's a big word because similar to Bernard, right? I think it's about sometimes the most simplest of aspects. And I think also it challenges us. So I think if I had to challenge also your earlier question of design versus chance, I would say that I don't know if we are confident enough to say that we have everything by design. We definitely still have a lot of chance in it.
Sure.
And I think what has been, even to the simplest extent was actually when you deal with people, it surprises you. And at the same time, it is, there are challenges with it. I think some of the most, I take my hats off to our coaches, for example. When talking to our artisans and engaging with them, part of it is also about trying to uplift them and trying to say that, we're not here to tell you what to do, but we need to convince you what to do as well. And I think some of the best, happiest moments that I've seen, I've experienced, is actually seeing the coaches engage with our artisans. And it's one of the cases was when one individual really loved to do a specific design, and they kept doing it again and again. And it's part of the the characteristics of a person with ASD, right? They would like the repetitiveness and the structure. But at some point, if you want them to also be, to some extent, a little bit more prepared for the workforce, you also have to get them to learn different designs. And it was as simple as our coach drawing up a sketch because this artisan liked a specific cartoon character. And she drew this cartoon character on a tracing paper and drew out this whole comic strip, which I was so amazed by. And it basically said that, one day the person came, they bought this type of jewelry. The next day they want to go back and buy another one for their girlfriend, their wife, but they only found the same piece.
Right.
and then when she showed it to us, and then we looked at how she communicated, it was like a pin drop moment. And then suddenly the artisan said, "Oh, okay, I'll learn a new one now." And we were like, okay, well, it wasn't as simple as that, but there was a lot of coaxing and coaching that needs to come with it. And it actually taught us that we need to communicate differently as well, right? We need to be at the right vocabulary, or even the way that they see the world as well. And I think it's been interesting because I like the whole idea of normalizing this inclusion, or normalizing the minority in that sense.
Yep.
And I think it's changed the way that we work, but also more importantly, how we engage. I think that's been some of the most innovative ways that we've also had to move along.
Exactly. I suppose with chance, there's also the opportunity, and it's how you seize and leverage off on the opportunity to make something that's worthwhile to what you are trying to achieve. Social enterprises, Sumitomo Life, they are corporates, businesses. Social enterprises are businesses. So I think that big question that we all really want to also know is inclusion ultimately good or bad for business? And what are some of the upsides and some of the downsides? It can't be all, fair and dandy, right? So anyone? Now we have silence.
So let me go first.
Go for it, Mike.
So I think it is definitely good for business, meaning diversity is very good for business. Let me share where I come from, my starting point. I'm in insurance business, and the insurance business is all about protecting the lives and livelihoods when in need. This includes disadvantaged people, people who have lost their family members, or people who have some form of disability. The point is that if we don't have understand about the customers that we want to protect, we will never be able to come up with the right product. From insurance business perspective, it is imperative for us to understand the diverse customers' need. In our previous homework webinar, we ran some webinars in inviting some corporate guest speakers, and one of our speakers from a leading healthcare company, where she said that diversity is a trigger to bring innovation. They talked about the importance of having diverse views in the process that come up with the innovation. That's why diversity is important and business imperative. That's my point of view.
Great. Diversity trigger for innovation. That's a really interesting thought. Anyone else?
I have some thoughts over here. I guess to make every single company or every single group to be inclusive and diverse. I don't know whether it's going to happen for everyone, but the underlying value and character in an inclusive environment is actually empathy. And I think more importantly is that we want to build that empathetic environment in everywhere around, where else is in Singapore, in companies. It's that empathy that allows us to understand each other and just to understand that it's okay. It's really okay.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm more for that value there rather than ensuring that every single company must have a diversified
Understand.
culture.
How will you translate that value, empathy, into something that's something that's good for your business?
Okay. I guess in what I see, probably in the F&B direction, in the business directions, we really require the diners to be a little bit more empathetic. Yeah, I guess I'm just like any other Singaporeans. If I go to a food place, I will just want food to be fast, to be cheap, to be huge. Huge amount.
Huge, yes.
Yeah, yes, huge amount. So yeah, I caught you guys there. Yeah, so that's a typical environment that I've been brought up in. And maybe that whole meritocracy, since I've been young, pushing things together, we demand to have the most effective, efficient means without understanding that sometimes it just may not be delivered in that way. So that's where the empathy part comes in. And directly in our business, in the F&B line, with that level of empathy between diners and the crew who are actually serving, I will assure you, every single F&B crew out there, regardless whether it's a fine dining or hawker, they are doing their very best. And I'm sure you have seen the hawker center, uncle, fried kway teow, perspiration everywhere. They are all working very, very hard.
Of course.
And we really need that empathy across with each other.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. With empathy, we also need to complement it with good quality products and services. So that's actually one of the key findings that we also had from the public perception survey that was just completed this year. Charitable buying can only get you that far. Empathy and so on and so forth. You really need to back it up, particularly as businesses, also with good quality, price competitive products and services. Yep. So maybe I'll turn this question as well to Eliza. Inclusive design is not particularly new. I think it's really it's picking up momentum as well worldwide. Tommy Hilfiger being one of the key that came up and said, that's what they're gonna do. So I'm not gonna ask that whether you aspire to be there, because I assume you aspire to get there. The question really is, what does it take for you to actually get there?
Oh, what does it take?
Yes.
I think where we are and the way we have modeled our business is a little different from Tommy Hilfiger's, because after all, they are fast fashion and they basically serve the mass market. But at Will & Well, aside from this, we also have our e-commerce, except we don't produce as fast as them, and we don't churn out designs as quick as them. But that's also because we pay attention to the customization of our clients. So they are very individual needs, right? Say, like every one of us have very different ways of dressing, and that differs across the spectrum. So as much as, I would like to get there, I would also like to do it a little differently, because there is a need to, that's where the needs are, to be able to understand very specific dressing challenges and being able to address it specifically through customizations is something we want to be able to continue to do.
Yep.
Yeah, hopefully we would very well love to be able to reach a bigger market. But I think even going back a little bit to the conversation about like inclusion, whether it's necessary, I think it is. Because for the longest time, the fashion industry has just been the most exclusive. It has always lived on it being exclusive, right? It's always been feeding on that exclusivity, right? Only VIPs get to come to the runway. All right. That's never gonna be me.
Never say never.
Yeah. So yeah. So I think it's very important in the entire process itself, even because you see, even the back side of things, right? Your manufacturing, your sewing machines, they were all designed and innovated since industrialization, right? Even us with a pair of like bright eyes would find it hard to even put that needle through that thread through that needle, right? What more like somebody who what more for an elderly, right? Or anyone else for that matter. So I think even down to the tools of it, I think that needs to be reconsidered.
Right.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's where the entrepreneurial spirit comes in, where you see a market gap, a market need, and that's where you go in for the kill, and who knows, maybe the whole market is looking for this kind of bespoke, very exclusive, inclusive, contradiction, exclusive, inclusive kind of fashion. And that's where you're able to make someone like Leon buy a $500 shirt.
Welcome.
Well, we're waiting for the shirts. We're waiting for the clothing now. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of turned my attention. I mean, we are the last 10 minutes, just over to Leon. There's two questions, really, but they are quite similar questions in the chat. So it's really about exploitation. How do you balance paying fairly versus seemingly exploitation? Many feel that organizations hire marginalized groups is because they are willing to take a lower pay. And I think that's another question that talks about exploitation of cheap labor. So what are some of your take? Because you hire almost exclusively as a ASD group.
Yeah, and it's a tricky one, right? I think there is certain balances that we always have to have. I think, just to take a step back, if we had to look at social enterprises in itself and try to understand where they're coming from, they deal with a lot of complexity, as we do with with our artisans, and I think Bernard does, Eliza does as well, Mike as well. But I think the question is, can we actually align our activities in such a way where the business is creating the right amount of value to market, is providing market-ready value to people, and then we can talk about the translation of those financial values into the workforce, right? I think that's always been our perspective, and we spend a huge amount of time trying to understand not just individuals from that context of complexity of adults with autism, but really just looking at their skill sets and whether we can benchmark that skill set to market readiness. And whether then, from that perspective, we are always there to make sure we keep them moving towards that value, right? Now, when we say value, it comes in different forms. The first is in skills, right? And the other bit, which of course is very much tied to the word of exploitation, is the financial remuneration that they receive. And we don't want them to be static, right? We need to keep them, when we talk about making sure that we ensure, and we're hoping and purposeful towards making sure that our beneficiaries have a way towards a life where they have the independence and that self-sufficiency. That's a huge task to ask already. But then we have to also be mindful that along the way, we have to also design a business to be able to keep catching up with those demands as well.
Yep.
Right? So I think it is one way of doing it. The part I think that is important, that I think that links to the question of exploitation all the time, is that social enterprises, back to your other question, cannot create value or cannot create very good value. And I would say that actually it's quite the opposite. Back to Mike's point with diversity, right? Diversity drives and creates a lot more value, but value that people actually want. So give you an example. For us, when we were at Ellie, one of the things that we've done with even not just our processes, with our adults with autism, but actually even in our core team, one of the things that we did was actually have one of our artisans actually be a go-between between our design studio and our manufacturing area, right? Our production location. And when we had her come over, we had to do a kind of a redesign of the space altogether and say, okay, if she came into our office and sat there to prepare all these production kits, what would that look like? What would be not only the simplest way, but the easiest way and the most straightforward way to check, to also ensure that it is packed properly and appropriately. And what we had to do was sit down and redesign the entire thing to make it very, very simple. And suddenly when we stepped back and we looked at it, I looked at it and I'm like thinking, actually anyone can do this now. I don't need, and in fact, we had applied so much complexity to it before because we thought we needed technology, we needed all this, special containers and special ways of packing it. Actually, it didn't. It was very, very simple. And so coming back to the question on diversity and value, can diversity drive value? It's changed our culture. It's simplified a lot of the way we work. It's actually been able to ensure that more people are doing more value-adding activities.
Yep.
And we've gone back to artisans, and we've also been, because of the way we're working with them, allowed them to produce even more complex weaving.
Yep.
And so I think, when it comes down to exploitation, that's purpose and also down to value creation.
Sure. Maybe I'll pass that same question to Mike as well, being from a corporate. I'm interested because corporates naturally or MNCs create a lot of value from the revenue viewpoint. How does that translate back into the workers, particularly the vulnerable? Is there like certain HR policies or practices that are put in place such that they are protected as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. So actually, as I mentioned before, the governmental quota is one driver. But beyond that, we found out that their ability. As for Smith Harmony, our subsidiary company, there are 170 PWDs, person with wheelchair, hearing impairment, as well as autism. And their productivity is higher than us because they have a very good concentration. And actually, they are working on our administrative work for Sumitomo Insurance, Sumitomo Life Insurance. And their productivity is very high. We provided a lot of training as well as we provide a suitable accommodation, barrier-free, accessible. We did so much things. And as a result, their productivity is very, very good. And without them, our business don't go well. So focusing on ability is very important and provide a suitable environment and provide suitable job opportunity, suitable job description. That's the very kind of crucial point.
I understand. So I suppose what I'm trying to drive at is that is there a need still, for companies to take a stand to say that I'm against exploitation, I will pay you per market, I'll give you that same progression that anybody in your same role or job will be able to enjoy. Is that something that must be there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree.
They can add value.
Yep. If they can add value, that's a very good point.
Yeah. But I think to that point, I think it's just we just have to be, as employers, really careful when we are designing the HR policies that we also, as Mike rightly pointed out, and I think it was a small point, but actually it's a really big point that Mike said, which was the job descriptions.
Yep.
If we properly bring that best out of them, then we know we'll be able to also remunerate properly, and it's about making sure that we have those two parts come together well, and then we have the policies that can protect them as well, that go beyond just the normal HR kind of support mechanisms.
Fantastic. I've seen a lot of enlightenment in the panelists this afternoon. I think this is really a good question to segue into. Are we the generation representing here, or all the things that we do? Are we the generation that's ready to value an inclusive workplace? Any thoughts?
First, we have to declare age first. Okay.
It's in the mind. It's all in the mind.
Yes. I think one of the most important things that I was really excited about today was coming together with some of the other companies and individuals who have shown that diversity is not just a plus point. It is a core, it is purposeful, and it's creating the value that not only the market needs from an economic standpoint, but that people need. that even our employees are benefiting from because of that inclusivity, because of that diversity, and we are providing that comfort. So for me, I think, yes, I think it is not only the generation that will value diversity, it's also the generation that's going to show that it is possible. And we really are, right? I think, rightly so, I think in so many ways and forms. So I think, yes. Sorry, I'll stop there.
I probably share something from my point of view. Yes, as well. I do see that our generation will be the one that will make that difference. I guess when I say our generation, there are two stratas that I will look at. The younger generation, that means my kids, the younger generation, they clearly see the needs to have social missions in what they're doing. But for us, those of us who are a little bit more senior, in the 40s, we have that consumerism power with some level of income development of what Singapore is. We can probably bring our spending and bring in consumerism into social enterprise. I just give a very simple example. I can spend $10 to eat at a normal restaurant. I can spend the same $10 to be eating at a social enterprise restaurants. That same $10 is going to create a positive impact, creating employment, training. And I think we are that generation. We have that consumerism power, we have that earning ability to make that small change, and yet the impact is so much more.
Thank you, Bernard, for giving me that vote of confidence that I can be part of that generation as well.
I carefully noted he looked over.
Yeah. So we're talking about inclusion here. Yes. Thank you. I feel included already.
Seniors.
So we're coming close to the end of the panel. So I think before we close, I'd just like to go a quick fire round with all my panelists. Just a very quick sharing or sensing. What's your wish list in trying to promote more inclusion and diversity in Singapore? And what are immediate next steps that you will embark on? Leon, just go for it.
Easy. There are lots of us who are well practiced in it, and we're still experimenting every day. Come up, ask us our experiences. We're happy to share. The other bit is there are lots of other organizations like RAISE who are doing great in promoting all these inclusive businesses, including other people like SG Enable. But more importantly, I think in all of this is that as a generation, I don't think people should be scared to say what else can social enterprises do. And I think
for the matter, what else can they themselves do?
They themselves do and be involved. And I think that what I really feel happy about is that we are the generation that's asking ourselves, not just how do we be against non-inclusion or be against inequality, but really about how we stand up for it. And that it's almost like what Bernard says, you stand up to go to the social enterprise, consume there, go to think about just not just about how do we prevent stuff, but how do we also really stand up for it. And I like that idea a lot.
Yep, sure. Bernard.
I want to go along the point of consuming at social enterprise, and maybe just to end off for every one of us over here, the next time you see an uncle, auntie selling tissue paper, buy from them. Because that's the most simplistic social enterprise. They are just trying to earn a certain living. And I think just buy the packet of tissue. And that'll be a wonderful activity.
Point noted.
I think I would like to go along with what Mike has always been mentioning about systemic changes. So I think my hope is that organizations will really see the value of the work that Eden and Lee with the work that Bernard is doing, and even the way I approach, the way Will and Will approach design, and to just be courageous to just take that step to explore a little bit and to see that value in it. And I believe that as we take these small little steps in our own private ways, we are also able to push it and do it in a larger scale, such that we are able to move faster as a generation. Yeah, that's about it.
Well said. Mike, you have the last word.
Yeah, so Alliance for Good is in my wish list. Just imagine what we could achieve together if all these communities or companies or individuals come together to achieve the same purpose. So this is a message for everybody, anybody, where you are individual or representing companies or communities. Get involved, small or big, no matter what the scale is. Today or tomorrow, reach out to me, reach out to us who are taking these initiatives. Get involved. There is always a role you need to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was an absolutely wonderful closing. You took the words right out of my mouth, so there's nothing much for me to say now. But to all our viewers and wherever you are, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. I just want to thank my esteemed panelists again, Leon, Bernard, Eliza, and Mike, all the way in Tokyo. All the best in your endeavors, and also stay safe, especially wherever you are. So thank you, and we'll see you another time.
All right. Thank you, Casper and panelists, for being here. And to the audience, I hope you had a fruitful time at this conversation today. If you wish to connect with any of our panelists, do reach out to them via the LinkedIn profiles that are being sent in the chat right now. Getting involved, as Mike has mentioned, is small or big. You can do it. Actually, you can do it now by checking out our festival website at festivalforgood.sg for more information and updates on the festival. Last but not the least, join us for our last conversation happening this Friday. Envisioning a different future when aging isn't aging. I hope to see you all there. So thank you and have a great day ahead.